When the Lamb broke the third seal, I heard the third living being say, "Come." And I looked up and saw a black horse, and its rider was holding a pair of scales in his hand. And I heard a voice from among the four living beings say, "A loaf of wheat bread or 3 loaves of barley will cost a day's pay, and don't waste the olive oil and wine." When the third seal is opened, the third cherubim calls forth a rider on a black horse. This image represents economic collapse and hyperinflation, which leads to famine. We've already seen this dynamic in action during the 2008 financial crisis. Previously comfortable families were plunged into poverty and began struggling to pay for food. For example, the Trussell Trust reported that UK food bank use rose by 170% in 2013. In the United States, Gleaner's Indiana Food Bank reported that 50 million Americans, that's 1 in 6, were experiencing food insecurity in 2012. The Bible tells us that the world's economy is going to become increasingly unstable and will suffer an even bigger collapse in the future. And this will lead to a period of still worse financial turmoil. When we consider that national debts are now so astronomical that they can never be paid back and are increasing by the second, we begin to understand that the whole world is sitting on an economic time bomb. In fact, if you go to nationaldebtclocks.org, you can watch world debt rising in real time. When this financial collapse takes hold, it will cost a whole day's wages just to buy 1 loaf of wheat bread. Barley will be slightly less affected, but even so, 1 day's wages will only buy 3 barley loaves. People are going to be struggling just to survive.
What could upset your outlook? Are there any kind of big events, macro events that could change the story for you in terms of where you're putting your money?
Oh, sure, worldwide collapse. If Spain suddenly goes bankrupt, Italy suddenly goes bankrupt, and they might, and they well might, but it doesn't look like it's going to happen anytime soon. But eventually, Amanda, of course, the whole world's going to collapse. We in the West have staggering debts. The United States is the largest debtor nation in the history of the world. This is going to end badly. We're all floating around on a sea of artificial liquidity right now, Amanda. This is not going to last. No. And when it ends, the bull market in commodities will probably end too. But the bull market on a lot of stuff will end.
There's an interesting nuance to this passage that's worth pointing out. It says, "A loaf of wheat bread or 3 loaves of barley will cost a day's wages, but don't harm the olive oil and wine." Bread is a cheap dietary staple. However, olive oil and wine represent expensive luxury items, and it seems that they won't be touched by the crisis. What the Bible appears to suggest here is that the inflation and food shortages will be an issue for the middle and working class folks only, but it will have almost no impact on the rich. We saw this dynamic in the aftermath of 2008 too. While many working people lost their homes and fell into poverty in the years following the collapse, and while tax hikes squeezed the middle classes to breaking point, manufacturers and retailers of prestige brands and luxury goods actually reported increased sales figures. In other words, the super rich were continuing to spend freely. The financial crisis hadn't caused them any discomfort. This has been the way throughout all history. When there's a rising tide of financial insecurity, the yachts are lifted, but the peasants drown. What we are witnessing today, and what will continue to occur in the future, is a widening gap between rich and poor.